Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 48 of Quattroporte, the review series for Gran Turismo's pretty broad selection of sports saloons all the way up to super saloons, sometimes called sedans, basically four-door performance cars. And in this particular pick we're featuring a car from a company which is known for sleeper cars to some degree, Lexus. And Lexus makes some of the best sleeper cars in the game. In fact, the GS300 is possibly the best sleeper car in the game, in my opinion, especially the older model. This car doesn't receive anywhere near as much attention as most other Lexus models, because most of the other models have some sort of useful gimmick attached to them. With the LFA, it's a different exotic to most other offerings from Europe and Japan. With the ISF, it's a good sports saloon. With the GS, it's a good sleeper. Even with the IS300 Sport Cross, it's an interesting, quirky wagon. With this car, though, it can appear a little bit more mainstream, and that can sometimes hurt a car. If a car doesn't really stand out, then it can sometimes be passed over for cars which at least look more interesting. Now, in some cases, that can make it a perfect sleeper car, such as with the GS300. In other cases, it can just mean that a car just gets completely forgotten. Maybe it even doesn't really deliver on even being a sleeper. Maybe it's just a car that's just that. Nothing special, just a car. So the question is, what is the IS200? Is this just another car, or is it a gem? Well, to some degree, it is a good sleeper. Not to the same degree as the GS300, nowhere near in fact, but it is a decent sleeper, I would say. That's the best way to describe this car. It's decent. It's not amazing, it's decent. It's good rather than great. Now, as far as power, its 2-litre turbo engine puts out 442 horsepower and 288 foot-pounds of torque. The weight is one of the best things about this car. It weighs 1,097 kilos, which is very good for a four-door car. It puts out 403 horsepower per tonne, and the PP fully tuned is perhaps a little too high, as is often the case with some of these cars, but not ridiculously high. 513 PP is perhaps a little too high. I wouldn't recommend racing it at that level, but at the same time, given how light it is and that it does have a decent amount of power, it's not overly surprising that it's around that level. As far as price, this car only costs 24,000 credits, so it is well priced. You do get a decent amount of performance, power, weight, etc. for your money. So the question is, does it deliver on what specs it has to work with? Well, around the track, this is a car which is certainly very useful for some things, and for others it's not necessarily bad, just not great. Now, some of the better points about this car are the fact that for a four-door vehicle, a sedan or saloon, it is relatively compact. It's not an overly large car at all. So on tracks which are tighter and which don't allow a much larger, say, Jaguar XFR or Mercedes E55 to really use that sheer power and that big, cumbersome weight, really works against them, on those kind of tracks, this car can shine, because it has a more kind of thumpy engine. The engine feels more ready to go. It doesn't really have to spool up in the same way that those cars feel like they have to really get the best out of them. It's more of a sprightly engine. The car itself is smaller, which means you can get through tight corners easier and potentially quicker. And it's also light, which means that the body roll that the car will be experiencing and the shift in weight from corner to corner will be reduced, which again helps with cornering. Now, as far as downsides, I would say the main downside is, and it's not really a downside as such, but it's just that the car isn't necessarily outstanding in any particular way. It's a solid car in every way. It's decent. It's just not mind-blowingly good. Now, people probably wouldn't expect it to be, but cars like this are still always worth a shot to see if they are potential sleepers. Look how good the GS300 is. It's incredible. This car, I would say, actually is still a sleeper because it is very quick. It's just overshadowed by the GS, very easily so, given how amazingly good that car is. In terms of handling, this car is a little bit different to what you might expect. It is rear-wheel drive, so a tendency to step the tail out can always be there in a saloon like that, but this is actually a far better drift car than I expected it to be. I was expecting the car to be relatively focused and by the numbers as far as handling. Small, lightweight, goes where you point it, basically, nothing special. It's actually very tail happy. Now, in a racing situation, that doesn't really work to your advantage, it wastes time, but that means that crucially, for people who enjoy using sleeper cars or sedans in general for drifting, this is definitely a car that you should bear in mind, for a number of reasons. The power is easy to cope with, which is essential for a drift car. You don't want the car to run away with itself. The weight is low, which for obvious reasons is good. The car is naturally tail happy, which means that you don't have to do a huge amount of work. And it's also cheap, which means that it's a great, say, beginner build for entry-level drifting. So overall, it's not an incredible car, but it certainly has its uses, and for those who are into those kind of things that I mentioned, it's a very worthwhile car to bear in mind. But that's it overall for this particular episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.